Stick around and watch me go from this image to this image. I'm going to go over some tips and tricks for background swaps. Stay tuned. Marie here. I wanted to pop on quick and just do a quick little edit where I bring in drop in a new backdrop and just give you a couple tips and tricks that I use to more or less seamlessly do something like this. The first thing that I do during the session is I always take a blank image of the background that I use in each set. And I do that with the same lighting that I use in my set, same set camera settings, and then I do different angles. I try to do standing and then whatever angles I used during the session, just so that I have a blank canvas to work with in case I need to do something like this where I want to add it into the background later. This background was only an 8x8, and I knew with this dancer and her flowing skirt that I would run into issues with the full-length images. So let me just kind of show you a little bit how I go about doing this. So the first thing I'm going to do with my image here is I'm going to crop in. I don't want to be working on pixels that I'm not going to use later. So I'm going to get her face in the upper third here, following the rule of thirds. So I'm just going to crop that in. And my computer's a little bit slow. But as you can see, I took the floor and I made it darker and kind of got this one, the blank image of the backdrop, a little bit more finalized so that I don't have to like change that color of the floor each time that I need to use it in something. So you have to excuse my very slow computer. Okay. So I'm going to flatten that. All right. So now what I'm going to do is the quick selection tool works pretty good now, or a select subject. So we're going to, her dress and arm and stuff is kind of similar to the background. So this might be a little bit tricky, but most of the time it does pretty good job. So I notice here, we're just going to kind of grab the rest of her dress. If it grabs more than the image, that's fine, because you can always see I can work on that later, so I'm not going to putz with that. I can mask that back. But if it grabs less, like here it didn't grab all the arm, you're going to want to try to get all that in the image. Otherwise you're going to have to really do some crazy masking. So this is similar tone, so it might be a little bit difficult. All right, that actually worked fine. Fingers look good. I noticed that it didn't grab all of her dress here, so let's see if we can grab that dress without it bridging in between. Sometimes it's gonna. All right. Alrighty. And in between the fingers, I can mask that out too. I don't want to get in there and spend all this time with those details. And I don't mind in between the hair there. Her face looks good. Okay. So then once I do that, I Command J, that gonna put her on a separate layer. So then you're gonna highlight that background layer because you're gonna be adding this one in between the two. So then what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna grab this one and I'm gonna bring it over and size it in there. Okay. Now, one of the most important things that we have to do when we do any kind of a swap is to really work on the shadows. I see so many composites where they add in the background and they don't add the shadows, and you can just tell they're just kind of floating above. So I work really, it's really important to work on those shadows. So obviously our light is coming from this way, and so our shadows are going to go in that direction. And if you take this off, you can kind of mimic and see where these shadows are already. So that's always a good place to start. So So above this layer, I'm going to put a blank layer. So I go on the bottom, hit the plus, and then I'm going to hit the B on my keyboard, and that's for my brush, or you can get to your brush tool however is easiest for you. You're going to want a black brush, and then I'm going to hit 1 on my keyboard, and that's going to give me 10% opacity. And you can work with flow if you want. Everybody edits in a different way. I don't use a pen and tablet because I'm left-handed, and I work so much with my shortcuts with my left hand. And so I never got used to the tablet. So I'm old school and use a mouse. Some people call it a rock, and that's fine, and it works for me, so that's just what I do. So I'm going to be painting in black at 10% on this blank layer. So I kind of start with a wide brush. There's different layers to shadows. And so I start with like an overall shadow, and then I kind of start doing the fine tuning. So I'm just going to go in there and kind of sweep in here, and you kind of follow like where the flow of the dress is. And you're going to want a big, really kind of soft brush, and just kind of bring in some of those base shadows that's going to fall on the floor from her dress. I would probably go in behind her like that. Yeah. All right, and sometimes I actually do the shadows on different layers so that I can fine tune the layers later. I'm gonna do one more tap back there. So then the next layer, I'm gonna go up to 20%. So I'm gonna hit the 2, and then I make that one smaller, and then that one is just kind of in where the closer to the subject, where it's like going to be hitting the floor a little bit more like that. Where it's farther, where a subject or an item is farther away from the wall, the shadow is going to be less and a little bit more spread out. Where things get closer to the shadow, or closer to the background or the floor, it's going to be a little bit more darker and sharp. So then I'm going to go to 30%, so 3, and I'm going to get a small brush, and that's where I'm going to do the really dark. The dark stuff where like her toes touch in the floor. Because sometimes the shadows actually go almost black. Now if you want, you can take those 2 layers and then toggle them off and on. And you can see here how it almost goes black right there and right where it's touching. So I think that's pretty good. And you can go step out, and then you can toggle on and off the shadow layer just to kind of make sure it looks right. But you can see the difference. Like if you don't shadow it, you can just tell that you have added that on there, and the shadow looks pretty good. And then you can go ahead, and if there's any further editing you want to do on the image, you can do that. I'm going to, oops, I didn't want that. I wanted you. Okay, so I'm just going to go in and then change that background color a little bit. There you go. I didn't want it so bright because her outfit is kind of a subtle color. And then we can play with the lightness and darkness too. We'll go a little bit darker. Pop her out a little bit. I always like to play with the preview too. Yeah, that looks good. So that's pretty much it. Just a few tips for swapping out backgrounds, making sure you take photos of the backgrounds you use during your sets in your studio, or you might just have like an AI background or one that you've purchased that you want to swap in. I do that a lot too. In my design shop, I do have a lot of backgrounds that I sell that are just really cool rooms and textured walls and things that I often use in behind different images, and you would do that the same way. So hope you've enjoyed this. You can please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will definitely be putting up more editing videos. Have a great day.